The first thing I want to talk about is actually sitting down in a yoga class, because that's the first thing you usually have to do. A lot of classes start in a seated position, and the teacher will say, come to a comfortable seated position. And I think sitting on the floor is not that comfortable for most people. I like to start a lot of times in this position, only because I can straighten up my spine in this position. This is called hero pose. So your knees are down, your butt's resting on your heels. Does that hurt anyone's knees? Is everyone okay with this position? Okay. If it does hurt your knees and you happen to have, I don't know if you guys have yoga blocks at home, but you can use a folded blanket or a yoga block, and you can put it underneath your sit bones, and that takes the pressure off your knees. But the main thing I want to say about sitting is that the whole point of sitting at the beginning of a yoga class is that you want to have a straight spine from the tip of your tailbone to the crown of your head. And the reason for that is you want to be able to breathe into your lower abdomen and really expand your belly. And if you're slumped like this and your back is rounded, you can't breathe very effectively. And so you want to be in a position where you can comfortably straighten your spine without putting a lot of effort into it. So the other position that people start out in a lot is a cross-legged position. So if everyone wants to try this one out, come to a cross-legged position, and that can be any kind of cross-legged position. You can have both feet on the floor, both your ankles on the floor. You can have one foot up. You can have both feet up if you're that flexible, which I'm not. But I think the hard thing about this one for most people is that your hips are now below your knees, and that makes it really hard to straighten your spine. So try to see if you can straighten your spine from your tailbone to the crown of your head. And you might be able to do it, but for me, I have to put a ton of effort in to maintain that, and then I can't breathe. So I really think pretty much everyone, unless you're super, super flexible, should put a block or a blanket, just slide one up underneath your sit bones. And so your sit bones are right on the edge of the block, or if you have a couple books or a pillow, anything you have around. And now you can see in this position, my hips are above my knees, and I can sit here comfortably. I could sit like this now for an hour because I can straighten my spine without putting a lot of effort in. And so now I can breathe into my abdomen. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, cool. So now that everyone's hopefully comfortably seated, before we start moving around, I just want to talk a little bit also about yoga breathing. Breathing and paying attention to your breathing is sort of the thing that separates yoga from just a stretching and strengthening class. You could take a calisthenics class or something like that, but it wouldn't be yoga if you're not connecting it with your breath. And the reason that we focus on the breath is because the breath is sort of like meditation. If you've ever done meditation, it's hopefully something that you're always doing 24/7. And so it's a tool you can use to bring your attention back to the present moment, instead of, if you find yourself thinking about what were you doing earlier, what you want to do later tonight. It's a way you can bring your thoughts back to what you're doing right now by focusing on your breath. And so the basic yoga breathing pattern is called 4-4 breathing. Breathing in for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4. And mostly you want to try to breathe through your nose. You might have heard of something called ujjayi breathing, which is one of those yoga words that you'll hear in yoga classes a lot. It's also called ocean breathing or whisper breathing. Basically, it's making a sound at the back of your throat as you breathe through your nose with your mouth closed. And it's a tool to help you focus your attention on your breath if you need that extra attention. If it feels weird and you don't like doing it, you don't have to do ujjayi breathing. But I just want to do a couple of breaths so you guys can see what it feels like. So let's do one breath, 4 in, 4 out. This one, I want you to open your mouth for the out breath, and sort of like you're trying to fog up a mirror. So breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Open your mouth. like you're trying to fog a mirror, and you feel that whispering sound in the back of your throat. Okay, so do that again, but this time with your mouth closed, and try to make the same whispering sound in the back of your throat. So here we go together. Breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, and out for 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can sort of cultivate that. It's just one of those things you'll hear in a yoga class, and I think for some people it helps them bring their attention back to their breath and pay attention to it. So do it if it helps you. And then the last thing about breath is that in yoga, we try to link every movement with a breath. You know, it'll be inhale your arms up, exhale your arms down, inhale, lean this way, exhale, you know, every movement is linked to either an inhale or an exhale. And again, that's just trying to have mindful movement and link the breath with the movement to make the practice more mindful. It's not always possible, and I think it can be really frustrating when a teacher is going slower or faster than your natural breathing. And so you breathe in, and then the teacher is talking and you're holding your breath and you're waiting to exhale, and then, you know, or they're going too fast. So I would say just try your best, but it's not critical. It's more important to go at your own breathing rhythm and try to match your movements with a breath. If you're holding a pose, don't ever hold your breath. Just breathe through it, take a round of breath, join the teacher on the next inhale, no big deal. All right, so what I wanna do today is go through the basic poses that are part of a Sun Salutation. Sun Salutation is a typical warm-up in a yoga class, and it's a really nice sequence of poses that allows you to warm up your whole body. It warms up all the major muscle groups. So you'll see these a lot in yoga classes. So I just wanna break down some of the tricky things about the elements of a Sun Salutation. So let's do a full Sun Salutation together just so you can see what all the elements are. So if everyone wants to stand up, and we'll go through one. I think you've probably all done one, but if you haven't, don't worry. We're gonna go through every little bit of it. Let's stand at the top of your mat with your feet together, standing pose. This is called mountain pose. And you're gonna start with an inhale, stretch your arms out to the sides, take your arms all the way up overhead till your palms meet and look up at your hands. And as you exhale, fold forward, arms go out to the side and down, drop your head down. Inhale, lift your head up, pull your shoulders back, lengthen your spine. Exhale, plant your hands, bend your knees, and step both feet back to a plank. Lower down. All the way down this time, lower your whole body down so your belly and your chest are on the floor. Inhale, lift your chest, lift your gaze to cobra, pull your shoulders back. Exhale, curl your toes under, lift your hips up to downward facing dog. Press into your palms, lift your hips up. Feel free to pedal your feet out here a little bit, get a little bit warmed up. And then bend your knees, look forward between your hands, and you can just take 1 or 2 steps to come back up to the top of your mat. Inhale to a halfway lift, long spine. Exhale, fold your head down. Inhale, come to standing, sweep your arms out and overhead, palms touch. And exhale your arms back to mountain. So that is a full Sun Salutation A that we just did. Everyone still with me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the first pose is the easiest one. It's mountain pose. And mountain pose is just a standing pose, but it's supposed to be an active pose. So you can either have your feet together or your feet hip distance apart, your choice. Your shoulders are back and down. Your chin is parallel to the floor. Your legs are engaged. Some people like to put their palms forward. So you're not just standing here and hanging out, you're actively standing. So that's mountain pose, also called Tadasana. And then you inhale, arms up, that's pretty easy. So the first real pose in this is a forward fold. And before we start on that, I just want to comment on one thing that's that you should bring your attention to in yoga, which is what your shoulders are doing in any of these positions. It's something that I just keyed into during yoga teacher training that I think really helps. So if you think about your shoulders, you have the heads of your shoulders and then your shoulder blades in the back. And you can either retract your shoulders, so you pull your shoulders back, you squeeze your shoulder blades together, sort of sticks your chest out, or the opposite, protracting your shoulders, pull your shoulders in towards each other, and that opens your shoulder blades up in the back. And so the whole sun salutation is a series of doing that movement back and forth, if you pay attention. And I think it's a good way to notice what's going on in each pose. So, so just try that a few times. Just practice pulling your shoulders in, and you can, that sort of pulls your shoulder blades apart in the back. That's protraction. And then retraction is squeezing your shoulder blades together in the back. And then of course, neutral is just in the middle. Okay, so forward fold, you've got your feet together, you're folding forward. And for most people, you really should bend your knees. There's no victory in keeping straight legs. It doesn't mean you're a better yogi if your legs are straight. In fact, it's better to do this with a slight bend in your knees because that allows you to take the pressure out of your lower back. And in forward fold, you can have your hands behind your shins. You can have your fingertips on the floor. But the thing you really want to do in this position is you want the crown of your head pointing towards the floor. And so you're sort of looking right at your knees. And if you're thinking about your shoulders like we just were, you're really rounding your shoulders, and your shoulder blades should sort of be separating and opening up in the back. So that's forward fold. The next pose is the opposite, and this is halfway lift. And I think this one's a little confusing for people. So halfway lift, you come up, your hands can be fingertips on the mat, or your hands on your shins, hands on your knees. It really doesn't matter where your hands are. I think what's confusing about this to me is that you'll hear teachers say flat back. And I used to think that your back needed to be like parallel to the floor to be flat, like you could set a glass of water on it. But they don't really mean flat like that. They just mean long. So long line, straight line from the crown of your head to your tailbone, just like we were doing when we were sitting. And so if it's slanting down, that's totally fine as long as you have a straight line from the crown of your head to your tailbone. And I think the best way to do that, to lengthen your spine, is to focus on your shoulders. If you get in this position, it might be easier with your hands on your shins, and then pull your shoulders back just a little bit, to subtle movement, and sort of stick your chest out, and then lengthen your neck so that the crown of your head is moving in the opposite direction of your tailbone. That really straightens your spine if you concentrate on pulling your shoulders back. And so that's the purpose of this movement, is it's the opposite of rounding and folding with the crown of your head facing down. Okay, that's enough about those. So again, we go from mountain, we go forward fold, your head's hanging down, back is rounded. Halfway lift, the whole point is a long spine, the shoulders retracted. And then you're gonna plant your hands down and you're gonna step back to plank pose. All right, let's talk about plank. If you don't wanna hang out in plank, you can put your knees down. But if you do, it's a really good core strength move. But in plank, you want your hands to be spread really wide, your fingers spread apart. You want your wrist crease to be parallel to the front of your mat. And you really want your shoulders to be stacked right over your wrists. You're up on your toes with your feet hip distance apart, not together. And your body is in a straight, long line. You don't want to sink your hips down so your back is swaying, or lift your hips up. You want to try to get your whole body in a straight line if you can. And it's always totally fine to modify this with knees down. You just still want to keep your body in a straight line. There's no, don't worry about doing that. You can always put your knees down. Any questions on anything so far? Everyone good? All right, I don't hear anything, so I'm gonna assume you're good. Okay, so from plank, we just stepped back to plank. And there's a couple of options here. We're basically going to take one of several ways to lower all the way down. And the one I did at the beginning was just lowering your entire body down as one unit, so you're laying on your belly. The next option is to lower your knees and then lower your chest down. Or the third option is the most difficult by far, and you really probably shouldn't try it until you've built quite a bit of upper body strength, which I'm still working on. And this is called chaturanga. And chaturanga is another one of those phrases that you'll hear in yoga classes. I had no idea what it meant for a really long time. I just sort of had a vague idea that it had something to do with this movement. But chaturanga is this position where you're hovering in this position, which is really hard to hold. That's chaturanga. And you never go down to your belly. You go from there straight into upward facing dog. So if you're going to do that, I'll just take a second to say this is really critical. I know at least 2 people who've had really bad shoulder injuries from doing chaturanga for years in the wrong way. So the right way to do it is, if you want to try this with me, you're in plank, shoulders over wrists. You want to push your body forward up on your tippy toes so that your shoulders are now over your fingertips. And then you want to lower down so that your forearm stays relatively perpendicular to the floor. Okay, so if you just look at me for a second, you don't want to lower down like this. You want to shift forward and lower down like this. It's a subtle thing, but you're keeping your forearm as perpendicular to the floor as you can. So it's a really hard strength move, and it takes some working up to. If you want to work up to it, you can go from plank, drop your knees, shift forward, and get that movement coming down like that. And then you'll eventually be able to work up to it. Okay, so from there, you're either fully on your belly or you're hovering in chaturanga. You're either going to go to cobra or upward dog. Upward dog is a subtle difference from cobra, where everything is off the floor. There's no part of your legs that are touching the floor except the tops of your feet. So your thighs, knees, everything's off the floor. Tops of your feet are on the floor. Cobra, your legs are on the floor, and you actually want a little micro bend in your elbows. So if you're in cobra, let's start with that. Your thighs are on the floor, tops of your feet are on the floor, fingers are spread, and you put a micro bend in your elbows. And then think about your shoulders. Pull your shoulders back, retract your shoulders, open across your collarbones, and lift your gaze up. It's a really nice back stretch. Upward facing dog, same motion, except you're up on the tops of your feet. All right, I'm gonna take a little rest here. Okay, so from cobra or upward dog, again, those 2 poses, plank and then cobra, are in opposition, because plank, you're thinking about your shoulders, you're protracting your shoulders. That's one thing I might not have mentioned in plank. If you want to come back into plank, I'm going to try to be sneaky and get you guys to do a bunch of planks during this. So if you're in plank, you really want to think about pulling your shoulder blades apart in the back. So you're pulling the middle of your upper back up towards the sky. You don't want to collapse down like this. You really want to pull up, and you're pushing through your hands. So you're protracting your shoulders. And then in cobra, you're doing the opposite. You're retracting your shoulders. So if you do all these movements a lot, you get a lot of really good spinal stretching and mobility. And then last one, from cobra, you're going to curl your toes under and lift your hips up to downward dog. So everyone go into downward dog, and we'll take a moment here. There's a lot to this one, and this is probably the most common pose you'll do in a yoga class. You can get really sick of them in a vinyasa class where you're constantly going back to downward dog. But it's a really important one. So starting with your hands, spread your fingers wide, and all of your 10 knuckles and your 10 fingertips should be pressed firmly into the mat. especially the knuckle at the base of your first finger. They call that the naughty knuckle because it's the one that wants to pop up. So try to press that one in if you can remember to do that. And then you're pushing through your arms. Your biceps are right next to your ears. Your hands are shoulder distance apart. And your whole body is in an upside down V. So for most people, I think you actually want to walk your feet a little closer to your hands than you think they should be so that you're really in a sharp V position here. So your hips are lifting up. But the thing that really is not important is whether or not your legs are straight and whether or not your heels are on the floor. So I think a lot of us have tight hamstrings and tight hips if you've ever done any running or cycling. So feel free to bend your knees and lift your hips, your heels off the floor, and then press through your hands. You're gazing at your knees and really use that to try to find some length in your spine, like under your armpits. You want that really, really long spine. So focus on lengthening your spine and don't worry about whether your legs are bent. If you have the flexibility, you can try to straighten your legs out. You can try to drop your heels down just as far as they want to go. But that's something to work up to. They call downward facing dog a resting pose, but I don't think it's very restful. I think it's a tough one. Okay, and then the only last thing I wanted to mention as far as yoga terminology before we start actually doing a class is the word vinyasa. Vinyasa just means a sequence of poses that flows together in a nice fluid way. So a vinyasa class is usually a flow class where you're moving almost like dancing from one move to the next. But you'll hear a teacher sometimes say, we'll take a vinyasa. And all the teacher means is we're going to do a little transition to get from standing to sitting or standing to downward dog. And usually what they mean by a vinyasa is taking some form of plank, cobra, downward dog, something like that. That's usually what they mean by vinyasa. So if you hear that term and they say, let's take a vinyasa, that's what they mean. It's just that little series of moves. That's another thing I wanted to say just in general. I mean, I think we all, especially in a class where you're with people in person, everyone feels like, you know, I've heard people say like, I'm not good at yoga, I can't do it right. And, you know, you want to do it all right and look like the teacher or look like everyone else in class. And I think, try not to think of it as like a dance class where everyone's supposed to look the same, because really in a yoga class, everyone should look different. I mean, we all have like totally different bodies, totally different geometry, different injuries, different history. And you're doing a pose right if you feel, sorry, can you guys hear me? I think my internet's being funky. Okay. If you feel a good stretch or you feel a challenging strength, you know, challenging in a good way, then you're doing it right. Even if you look totally different from the next person. If it feels good to you and you're getting a good stretch, it doesn't matter if you're doing it exactly the same way. The only thing wrong is if you feel pain, pinching, especially joint pain, knee locking is not good, then just take a break. And a lot of teachers will say, come into child's pose, which nobody ever actually wants to do in a class because it's very conspicuous. But it is totally fine to just go down and rest and wait for the next pose. You can also just come down to your knees and sit and watch and wait for the next pose. I think it's really unlikely that you're going to be in an hour-long yoga class and you're going to like every pose and every pose is going to feel good to your body. So most likely there will be 2 or 3 poses that just don't work for your body. And you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And just sit it out, wait for the next pose. It's no big deal at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just going to be pretty short, just to practice some of the things we did and get a little bit, so you can get a little bit of movement in today rather than just listening to me talk. I am going to go ahead and mute everyone if that's okay. Okay, you guys are muted. So we're already a little bit warmed up, but let's just come to a tabletop position, which is another really common position. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but you basically want your back to be flat, hands shoulder width apart with your shoulders over your wrists, and your knees are hip distance apart with your hips right over your knees. So you do want your back to be flat here, like you could put a glass of water on it. And then from here, keep your hips right over your knees and walk your hands out. This is called puppy pose. Walk your hands out with your palms flat. Keep your arms straight and just lower your forehead down to the mat. So your hips are up in the air, right over your knees. Your arms are straight, and then just stretch your chest down to the mat. And you should feel a really nice stretch through your chest, through your armpits. Really stretch your fingers wide, and just let this back stretch your whole spine here. Take a breath. Breathe into your belly. And then walk your hands back up to tabletop. And we'll do another little shoulder stretch here, which I think feels really good. Take your left hand up to the sky, stretch it up, just gently twist, and then take that hand under your right armpit. This is called thread the needle. So under your right armpit, drop your left shoulder down, drop your head down, and then if you like, you can lift your right arm up to the sky. So you're just sinking into that left shoulder. If you'd like to take this into a little more of a twist, you can take your right hand behind your back, wrap it around your back so that your hand is on top of your left thigh. And you can sort of pull your right shoulder back a little bit if that feels good. And then just bring your right hand back to the mat, come back to tabletop. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So lift your right arm up to the sky, stretch it up long, look up, and then reach that right hand under your left armpit. Drop your right shoulder down, drop your head down, and sink into that right shoulder. You can lift your left hand up to the sky to open across your chest a little bit. And if you'd like to try taking it a little deeper, you can reach that left hand around your back to touch the top of your right thigh and pull your left shoulder back into that. Hopefully that feels pretty good. And then bring your left hand back to the mat, right hand back to the mat to tabletop. Curl your toes under, and we're gonna just lift up into plank and then lift your hips up to downward facing dog. So usually when I'm coming into downward facing dog, I have to walk my feet a little bit closer because again, I think most people take this too wide between their feet and their hands. It actually, I think works better if you have a tighter V. So find your downward dog, take a breath here. Your gaze is at your knees, your hands are spread wide, your heels are sinking down. And then look forward and just walk yourself up to the top of your mat. Head is still down. And slowly, slowly, one vertebrae at a time, come all the way up to your mountain pose. And you decide how you want to do your mountain pose. That can be feet together, feet hip distance apart. Either way, standing up tall, shoulders back and down, neck is long. And we'll take that same Sun Salutation to think about all those little points we talked about. So inhale your arms out, sweep them up, palms touch, look up. Exhale, fold forward, drop your head down. Crown of the head is pointing towards the floor. Inhale, halfway lift, pull your shoulders back, long spine. Exhale, plant both hands, step your feet back to high plank. Shift your weight forward and lower down. Let's all lower all the way down to our bellies this time. Uncurl your toes, lift your chest, squeeze your glutes. Thanks, Nina. Pull your shoulders back, lift your gaze. This is Cobra. And then exhale, curl your toes under and lift your hips up to the sky and you're back in downward dog. Good, take one round of breath here, evening out your breath, deepening your breath. Come up on your toes, bend your knees, look between your hands, and you can step or lightly hop up to the top of your mat as you inhale, come back to that halfway lift, long spine from the crown of your head to your tailbone. Exhale, fold forward, drop your head. Inhale, sweep your arms out to the sides, all the way up overhead, palms touch. Exhale your hands back down to mountain. Great, so that was Sun Salutation A. We'll do a couple more of those with some embellishments to make it a little more interesting and get some more stretching. So starting again in mountain, inhale, sweep your arms out and up, palms touch. Exhale, fold forward all the way down. Bend your knees. Inhale, halfway lift, long spine. This time just step your right foot back into a lunge. Right foot back, drop your back knee down, uncurl your toes. So you're in a low lunge. And from here, inhale your arms up to the sky. So you're in a crescent lunge. Take a moment, make sure your knee is right over your ankle. And take a round of breath here. Lift your hands up to the sky and let your hips sink down towards your mat. Good. Drop your hands down to the mat to frame your foot. Straighten your front leg out. Shift your hips back. And you might need to walk your fingertips back. Pull your toes up. Flex your toes towards your forehead. And then fold over that front leg. This is a really nice, hopefully a nice hamstring stretch. Fold forward. And then shift your weight forward back into that lunge. We'll take that crescent lunge again. So inhale your arms up to the sky, reach up, try not to shrug your shoulders. And just let your hips sink a little bit lower down towards your mat. And then plant your hands on either side of your foot. Curl your back toes under, step your left foot back to plank. And then we're gonna shift forward and lower all the way down. Belly and chest on the floor, uncurl your toes, pull your chest up, gaze is up, glutes are engaged for cobra. Curl your toes under, lift your hips up to downward facing dog. This time, step your right foot forward, back to a lunge. Drop your left knee down, uncurl your back toes. Inhale your arms up, and we're back in our crescent lunge. This is called crescent lunge because you're sort of reaching almost back, so your back is in a curved shape. And then exhale, place your hands on either side of your front foot. Straighten your front leg, flex your toes towards your forehead as you drop your head down over that front leg. Really gentle here, just take a nice, easy hamstring stretch. And then shift your weight forward into the lunge. Inhale your arms up, reaching your fingertips up to the sky, at the same time sinking your hips down towards the mat. Try to unshrug your shoulders here. Good, and then plant your hands down either side of your foot. Curl your back toes under and step back to downward facing dog. Lift your hips up high, press your palms into the mat, gaze is at your knees. Take a breath here. Come up on your toes, bend your knees, look between your hands, and lightly hop or step to the top of your mat. Inhale, halfway lift, long spine. Exhale, fold all the way down, bend your knees. Inhale, sweep your arms out and up overhead, look up. Exhale, back to mountain. All right, we'll do one more of those, a few more embellishments. Inhale, sweep your arms out and up, touch. Exhale, fold all the way down. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, plant your hands, step your right foot back into a lunge. Keep your back knee up, so this is a high lunge. Plant your right foot down, plant your right hand down, lift your left hand up. So you're twisting to the left, reaching up to the sky with your left hand, pressing into the mat with your right hand. And then exhale your left hand back down to frame your foot. Step your left foot back, lift your hips up to downward facing dog. And then step your right foot forward into a lunge. Keeping that back leg really engage your quads. Plant your left hand into the mat, lift your right hand up to the sky. Should feel a really nice twisting stretch here to the right. Reach that hand up and exhale your right hand back down to the mat. Step your right foot back to plank. Shift forward. You can try the chaturanga if you want, hover or just lower yourself all the way down. Feel free to put your knees down and then come up to cobra or upward facing dog. Pull your shoulders back. Inhale, curl your toes under, lift your hips up high, downward facing dog. Exhale, bend your knees, come up on your toes, look between your hands, and lightly hop or step to the top of your mat, halfway lift. This is where you want that long spine, shoulders back. Exhale, fold down, crown of your head towards the mat. Inhale, sweep your arms out and up. Look up at your hands. Exhale, back to mountain. Great. So usually after a few of those, you should be feeling pretty warm. You should feel like everything is pretty loosened up. Hopefully everyone feels that way. We're going to take a balancing pose now. So one of the most classic balancing poses is called tree pose. You've probably all done it. But we really don't focus on balance very much in our lives. So we'll take a moment to do that. We're going to start with your left foot planted. So come on your left foot and just lift your right foot off the floor and just stand here like this and make sure you feel balanced. Sort of feel where your weight wants to be in that foot. One thing that helps me is I like to imagine that I have a string attached to the top of my head like I'm a Christmas ornament. And if somebody pulled on that string, it sort of makes me think about straightening my spine. And then, I don't know if that works for you, but it works for me. Take your right foot and put it on the inside of your left leg, either below your knee, or if you want to be ambitious, you can pull it all the way up above your knee. Just don't put it on your knee. And then hang out here, take your time, think about lifting the crown of your head up. If you feel stable, you can bring your hands to prayer position at heart center. Drop your shoulders down, tuck your tailbone under. Beautiful. Try to gaze at one point right in front of you. And for a little more challenge, you can take your fingers, interlace your fingers, turn your palms inside out, and then slowly raise your arms up overhead. If you lose your balance, don't worry, just come right back to it. That's the whole point, is we're playing with balance. See if you can open that right knee out just a little bit more, keeping your balance. Just play with it. And then bring your hands back to prayer position and release that leg. You guys have done this before. Those are awesome trees. All right, other side. So bring your weight into your right foot. Make sure you've got your balance. Shoulders back and down, crown of your head lifted. And then bring that foot to the inside of your leg, wherever you like, just not on your knee. Find your spot that you're going to gaze at. Bring your hands to heart center. Tuck your tailbone under, shoulders back and down. And if you want to try the challenge, interlace your fingers and turn your hands inside out so your palms are facing the sky. And as you breathe here, try to imagine that the spaces between your ribs are really getting wider and opening up. If you really want to challenge your balance, you can try looking up at your hands, but that's really, really hard. I'll probably fall if I try that. Okay, hands back to chest center and release. Beautiful. Good to practice balance a little bit every day. So come back to the top of your mat, back to mountain pose. We're just going to do one more little vinyasa flow here. So starting again in mountain. Inhale, sweep your arms out to the sides, up overhead. Exhale, fold all the way down. Inhale, halfway lift, long spine. Exhale, plant your hands, step both feet back and lift your hips up to downward facing dog. Lift your hips high, pull your navel into your spine. And then lift, as you inhale, lift your right leg up and long behind you. Point your toes, strong quads, strong leg. Exhale, pull your knee into your nose, round your spine and come into that plank position, shoulders over your wrists. Pull your knee in. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhale, lift your leg long behind you, stretch it long. Exhale, pull your knee in, shoulders over wrists. Inhale, your leg long behind you. Exhale, shoulders over wrists, and then plant that foot down into a lunge. So you're in that high lunge again. Make sure your feet feel pretty stable. And then inhale your arms up to the sky and sink your hips down. Really engage the quad in your back leg to feel a strong lunge here. We're gonna do a little twist, so we'll be in this lunge for a minute. So bring your hands back to that prayer position at heart center. Take your left elbow and hook it around the outside of your right knee. And then use your hands, sort of push your right hand into your left hand to revolve your torso around to the right. Just take it slow. Your goal is to try to get your hands to the center of your chest, but that's probably not going to happen, not at least for me. But try to keep your shoulders away from your ears. Your gaze is over to the right, and you're just twisting. Beautiful. And release that twist. Drop your hands back down to frame your foot and step your left foot back to downward facing dog. Lift that right foot up one more time, long behind you. Inhale. Exhale, bend your knee. This time we're going to come into pigeon. So take your right knee behind your right wrist. Drop your back knee down. This is another really iconic pose in yoga. If you've never done it before, I think you guys probably all have, but just a couple of things. You want your right knee to be off to the side. You don't want it at midline. You don't want your knee right in front of your torso. You want it to be off to the side. You want your front heel sort of under your hip or in front of your hip, depending on your flexibility. And then stretch your back leg out long with your knee and the top of your foot on the floor. If you have a folded blanket or towel near you, you can tuck that under your right hip. Most of us have a little bit of space between the hip and the floor, so it's nice to feel supported there. You shouldn't be hanging out in the air. So if you're doing this in a class, take time to put a blanket there because it really helps. And usually teachers hold this pose for a good minute or so. So your hips should be centered so that you're not falling off to one side. And then once you find that, you can walk your hands forward and you can rest down on your elbows and forearms, or you can lower all the way down to your forehead. You can rest your forehead on your hands. And this is a deep, deep hip stretch. So you want to take your time with it and use the time to notice your breathing, try to even it out. And notice any tension or soreness that you have anywhere that you're hanging on to, and try to let that go. This position can be pretty intense, and I think it gets a little itchy and people want to move around, but try to resist that and try to just release into it if you can, just for a moment. And then lift your head up, plant your hands back on the mat, curl your back toes under, and take your time, step back to downward facing dog. Lift your hips up high. Good. From here, lift your left leg up to the sky, stretch it long, strong quads. Inhale. Exhale, pull that knee into your nose, shift forward so your shoulders are right over your wrist. Curl it up tight. Inhale, lift your left leg long behind you, stretch it up. Exhale, pull your knee into your nose, shift your whole body forward, up tight. One more time, inhale, you stretch. Exhale, pull your knee in, shift your shoulders over your wrists. From here, take that foot, step it between your two hands, and we're gonna come into that lunge. So find a strong lunge. Knee is right over your ankle. And then inhale, lift your arms up to the sky, drop your hips down, and your back quad is really, really engaged. Back heel is lifted. Bring your hands to prayer position at heart center, and then take that right elbow and hook it over the outside of your left knee. And you can twist as much or as little as you like. But if you want to use your hands, press your left palm into your right palm and try to revolve your torso around. This can be a little shaky, that's okay. And drop your shoulders away from your ears. Try to gaze sort of over your left shoulder, if you can still balance that way. And then drop your hands back down to frame your foot and step your left foot back. Lift your hips up high to downward facing dog. Inhale your left foot back behind you, stretch it long. Exhale, bend your knee. We're coming into pigeon on this side. So left knee behind your left wrist. Take your time. I like to use my back toes to walk that leg back so that I can sort of take my hips down using that back leg. And then I rest my back foot, the top of my back foot on the floor. Again, take your blanket or your towel and put it underneath that hip if you need to. Once you feel reasonably good in that position, then you can walk yourself forward, fold onto the floor. You can just stop on your forearms and rest, let your head drop down there. Or you can drop all the way down with your head on the floor. Just wherever you feel the best stretch. And again, take a moment to turn your attention inward. Close your eyes. Try to find some stillness here. Even if you feel like you want to shift around, try to be still and let everything release that you're holding. Great job. One more breath. And lift your head up, plant your hands in front of you, curl your back toes under. We'll step back to our very last downward dog for the day. Lift your hips up, get one last stretch through your armpits. And we're going to come into seated position from here. So this is something you'll see a lot in yoga classes. So if you look forward between your hands and bend your knees, come up on your toes, you're going to hop forward and sort of cross your ankles as you hop. So hop forward, cross your ankles, and then set your glutes down on the mat. Good job. You guys got it. Okay, so we'll do some folding forward stretches. Take your your left foot and place the sole of your left foot on the inside of your right thigh. So this is a seated tree pose, basically. Inhale your arms up to the sky and exhale, fold over your right leg. Grasp your foot or your ankle or your shin and just fold over that leg. Lengthening your spine with the inhales, folding a little deeper with the exhales. Good, and then gently come back up. Take that left foot and cross it over your right knee. Keep your right leg long. Place your left hand behind you and squeeze your knee in towards your chest. Look over your left shoulder and just take a little gentle spinal twist. You can always take these deeper by taking your elbow to the outside of your knee and then using that extra leverage, if you like to do that, to revolve your spine around. When you're breathing in, just remember to lengthen your spine as long as you can, and then revolve a little bit more as you exhale. Good, release that, stretch both legs out, shake your legs out, and then bring your right foot to the inside of your left leg. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So seated tree, settle your sit bones in, inhale your arms up to the sky, exhale, fold forward, flex your left toes, grasp your foot with a C grip or your ankle or your shin. Inhale, lengthen, exhale, fold. Just let that right knee fall out to the side. Take one more breath here. And as you come up, cross that right foot over your left knee. Right foot is flat on the mat. Right hand goes flat behind you and squeeze your knee into your chest, twisting to the right, gazing over your right shoulder. And you can just keep squeezing that knee in, or you can take your elbow to the outside of your knee for a little bit deeper twist in your lower back. That feels really good. Pull that right shoulder back as you look over your shoulder. Good. And then release and stretch both legs out in front of you. Let's just take one forward fold with both legs out to balance things out. So inhale, stretch both arms up, lengthen up to the sky, flex your toes, and exhale, fold over your legs. Grasp the outsides of your feet or your ankles with your hands and just give yourself one last little fold forward here. Great, and release that. You can come down to lay on your back. We'll just take a couple of reclined stretches here. We'll do just one bridge pose, which I think most people don't love bridge pose, but it's a really nice counter stretch to all of these things we've been doing. So bend your knees, put your feet flat on the mat with your knees hip distance apart, and try to reach down and see if you can touch your heels with your fingertips. And then tip your tailbone up, sort of curl it up and start to squeeze your glutes, lift your lower back, lift your middle back, all the way up so you're lifting your upper back. Keep your knees parallel, quads engaged. And once you're here, if you like, you can start to walk your shoulders underneath you a little bit and interlace your fingers in the back. And that allows you to really lift your upper back up if you have that range of motion. So you're squeezing your glutes, you're squeezing your quads, your knees are parallel, lifting up your whole spine all the way up to your upper back. Beautiful job. And then slowly lower down just the way you came, starting with your upper back, ending with your lower back. Very nice. Pull your knees into your chest, give yourself a squeeze. Feel free to rock side to side, rock around in circles, whatever feels good here. And then let your knees open out to the sides, reach between your knees, take the outside of your feet with your hands. This is happy baby. So you're grasping the outsides of your feet with your hands, elbows are on the insides of your knees, and your knees are just dropping down towards the sides of your body. You can feel free to rock from side to side if you like. Just enjoy that. Soles of the feet are facing the ceiling. You can play with your lower back. If you lower your feet a little bit towards your glutes, that lowers your tailbone down and you can sort of feel your whole tailbone contacting the mat. And then if you lift your feet back up, so the soles of your feet are facing the ceiling, that lifts your tailbone up. So sometimes that feels good to do that motion just to work your tailbone out a little bit. And pull your knees into your chest one last time. We'll just take a couple of side twists again to stretch your right foot out long and pull your left knee over to the right across your body. Stretch your left hand out to the left. You can turn your head and gaze at your left hand if that feels good. And as you relax into this, try to let your left shoulder drop down in the direction of the mat. Mine is definitely not touching, but I'm trying to let it drop back in that general direction. And start to come back to center. Pull both knees in, squeeze them tight. Stretch your left leg out long. Pull your right knee in, and then take your right knee over to the left across your body. Down to the floor and stretch your right hand out in a T. Feel free to turn your head if it's comfortable for your neck to gaze at your right hand. And breathing as deep as you can, all the way down into your belly. Good, slowly come back to center. Pull your knees into your chest one last time. Give yourself a good squeeze. And then let your legs drop down. We're gonna come into final relaxation. Corpse pose or Shavasana. So spread your legs so that your legs are as wide as your mat. Flop your hands out to the side. Let your hands be wide away from your body. Close your eyes. And this is another unique thing about yoga classes, that you always end with a nice little rest so you can absorb all the work that you did. So This is the time to completely let everything go. You don't need to think about your breathing. You don't need to think about what pose you're holding. Just let everything relax. Imagine that your body is a really heavy lead weight and the ground is soft clay. And your whole body is just sinking into that clay. Relax your face, relax your eyebrows and your jaw and your tongue. Relax your shoulders back. Let your abdomen and your hips release. Just scanning your body, looking for any tension you have. Release anything you're holding in your hands and feet. And just relax. We'll just take a minute of silence here. Start to bring a little bit of movement back in. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, move things around. I like to take a long body stretch with hands overhead. Feel free to pull your knees into your chest. And then take your time, roll over onto your side and come up to a seated position. All right, and we'll take one last breath together. So close your eyes, let your shoulders drop down and back, lengthen your neck up. Exhale first, just let all your air out, empty your lungs. Bring your hands to heart center and inhale. Fill your lungs up, fill your belly up, biggest breath of the day. And exhale, drop your head down, let it all out with gratitude for everything you were able to do today. Namaste.